Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Riding of Yorkshire series. Together with the unparished city of Hull, it forms the county of the same name. There's 172 parishes here. Which one are we in today? Welcome back to the East Riding of Yorkshire, everybody. Now, a few episodes ago, when we were in Carnby, you may remember in the intro to that episode, I mentioned something called the Carnby Temple, and I said you'd have to wait until this episode to actually see it. It does fall within the boundaries of Carnby, but it makes a lot more sense to cover it in this episode, and the reason for that is because it's linked to the village that we're about to walk around. We're heading up towards the temple here on this public footpath. You can't quite see it yet, but trust me, it's up there. The Carnby Temple and the village in question are all going to feature in the episode of Boynton. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Boynton, Bofa's farm. This week in the East Riding we come to a place that's heavily linked to the bird that's usually found on everyone's table at Christmas. Yep, the humble turkey. It's been a part of our festive traditions in this country for centuries, but what you may not know is that the bird is actually native to the Americas. It was introduced to Britain in the 1500s, and it's fair to say we've run with the idea since then. It's here in the tiny East Yorkshire village of Boynton where we find part of, not all, of the reason why turkeys came to these shores. Situated between Driffield and Bridlington, Boynton village doesn't have a lot to write home about, but nestled at the southern end of its linear main street is a hall where the Strickland family once lived, first acquiring the building and the estate in 1549. One of their number, William Strickland, originated from Marske on the North Yorkshire coast. He was an intrepid explorer and navigator and sailed many times to the Americas. It's said that Strickland acquired 6 turkeys by trading with Native Americans whilst on an early voyage to America in 1526. He brought the birds back and sold them, and was able to continue doing so until he'd amassed a massive fortune, enough to build his own stately home. Let's have a look at the place and see if we can spot some turkeys here in Boynton. We start today's episode in the parish of Carnby on a track called Temple Lane. Before us here is the Carnby Temple, which the locals affectionately know as the Pepper Pot due to its shape. It's not a house, although I guess it could be lived in if it was fitted out properly. Instead, it's Noctagonal Folly, built by Sir George Strickland in 1770. The structure is based on the Tower of the Winds on the Roman Agora in Athens. The land this stands on is part of the Boynton Hall estate, and in theory has nothing to do with Carnby village, despite the name. In 1952, it was given a Grade 2 listing. Okay, so the temple is located on top of a hill. It's not the biggest hill in the world, but it's still going to be fun going back to the car here because the ground is quite wet underfoot, so I've got to be careful not to slip. And the temple being on a hill means that you can see the sea from here. You might not be able to see it on the camera, but trust me, it's there. In the distance, the sea is over there somewhere. sort of where my finger is. I can see it quite clearly. Don't know whether you can. But yeah, great view from up here. And to be fair, the sea is pretty much the only landmark you can see from here apart from the temple itself, because everywhere around here is just farmland, lush farmland everywhere. There are some woods though as well. There's some woods over there, and there's also some woods between where the temple is and Boynton village. And what we're going to do is, when I eventually get back to the car without slipping over, I'm going to put the camera on the dash and drive through those woods, and then we'll go into Boynton village and see how this thing is linked to the village itself. We're on Woldgate here, which marks the boundary between Carnby and Boynton. At this point it's surrounded by plenty of woodlands. The one we're driving through here is Sands Wood, but there are plenty of others around, including West Lawn Wood, Hallowkiln Wood and Fish Pond Wood, to name but three. Not all of these woodlands are ancient. Some were planted by the Strickland family, who owned the Boynton estate. Sir George Strickland was quite handy when it came to planting trees. His son, William, continued his father's planting, and in 1813 records show he had finished planting Sands Wood. It has about 50,000 trees, about half of which are larch and the rest are all kinds of other deciduous types. That same month he also planted an orchard with 40 apple trees on a hillside northwest of Boynton Hall. Keep in mind, the William Strickland we're talking about here is not the same William Strickland who was associated with turkeys. He came centuries before. Let's go to Boynton and find out a bit about him. So this is Boynton village, and it's not the biggest place in the world. Effectively it's one long street, but it's split into two parts. These are known as Boynton Village North and Boynton Village South. Here we're in the north. This part of Boynton is wholly residential, and most of the main features and landmarks are in the southern section. Boynton was a difficult village to research. Type the name into any internet search engine and overwhelmingly you'll be met with information related to turkeys. That's the biggest thing the place is known for, but there are a few other bits we need to consider. At the end of the northern part of the village we pass an old forge. Its tall brick chimney a lasting remnant of past times. Splitting Boynton into two pieces is the B1253, the same road that we met last time out in Rudston. Once an ancient trackway, this connects the village to Bridlington's old town. Now we're in the southern section of the village, and first up here is a hefty dual-spouted pump with a compound handle and stopcock on the lower spout. That can be found right next to a parish notice board, so let's get Boynton marked off the East Riding list. We are down to 10. Excellent stuff. Behind them both is the village hall, a modest building that serves as the communal hub for this North Wolds community. Try as I might, I could find no real history about this, not even a date for its construction, but I am reliably informed it's still used well, and so it should be. Now from this point onwards the village becomes residential again, until we get to the end of the road, that is. Boynton has a lot of grand houses. This one is West Lawn Farmhouse. It's made of an unusual material, chalk rubble, and dates from the late 18th century. It's also listed, and there are 17 such buildings in Boynton. Here's the old vicarage, early 18th century date-wise, but again a listed building. This could so easily be mistaken for a manor house. Interestingly, two of the other listed buildings in the village are industrial. They are a woolen manufactory and a dye house, set up by Sir George Strickland in the mid-1700s. This was praised by the agricultural writer Arthur Young, who visited Boynton in 1768. The former factory can be found within the grounds of Boynton Hall, and a pair of stone gates mark the entrance to the estate. We can go no further here owing to the fact that it's a private road. So our last landmark is the church, whose 15th century tower stands tall over the hall's entrance. This one features memorials to the Strickland family who were seated at Boynton Hall. Perhaps their most famous member is buried right here in this building, William Strickland of Marske. He was the man accredited with introducing turkeys to England via his many trips to and from the Americas in the 16th century. The church is adorned with images of the birds. It has stone sculptures of them on the walls, stained glass windows which feature them, and they're even carved into its lectern. Okay, so I was hoping to see a bit more of Boynton Hall from this path that runs around the edge of the churchyard, but as you can see, there are lots of trees in the way and I can't really see anything. There is a bridleway that runs in the other direction, that around the other side of the hall. It takes you down to the road off which you can get to the Carnby Temple like we did earlier, but it would take me miles out of the way and you probably wouldn't see anything from that anyway. No matter though, because of course the internet exists and I know there's plenty of pictures of Boynton Hall on there. So here's a bit about the hall to finish. A Grade 1 listed building, Boynton Hall is a country house originally constructed in the late 16th century, although it's been remodelled several times. It's built of red brick with stone dressings and a slate roof. The hall stands within an associated park whose features include a walled garden and of course the Carnby Temple. Other buildings such as the dairy, the pigeon house and the lodge are all Grade 2 listed buildings. William Strickland acquired the house in 1549. Twice MP for Scarborough, Strickland was an intrepid explorer and navigator and was reputed to have sailed to America with Sebastian Cabot several times from Bristol. It's said that he acquired 6 turkeys by trading with Native Americans on one of his early voyages in 1526, bringing them back to Bristol and selling them at a market in the city for 2pence each. This, so the story goes, inspired him to continue in the turkey trade, and reputedly his poultry-based endeavours made him an absolute fortune. So much money, in fact, that he was able to build his very own stately home. That home was Boynton Hall. The hall passed down to his grandson, the parliamentarian Sir William Strickland, who was MP for Heddon from 1640 to 1653. It descended through the Strickland family, who made several modifications and renovations to the building. In 1720, an extra floor was added with a new slate roof, and in the 1760s the front of the house was infilled by the York architect John Carr. The direct Strickland line failed in 1938 on the death of Sir Walter, the 9th Baronet, who had renounced the title and left the country. The hall would pass to the Strickland Constable branch of the family, who sold it in the 1950s. The house was then bought back in the 1980s by a family member. Today, the owner of Boynton Hall is Richard Marriott, a distant descendant of the man who brought turkeys to England. And folks, that brings our turkey-related adventures to a close. I'm pretty sure after watching this episode, you'll all be thinking a little more about the food on your table this Christmas time. Without William Strickland, one Christmas tradition may never have come to England. See you next week for more? Of course. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.